Hello, I'm Rosalia, and this is Estevan. We come to you today for the El Camino Real Trade Fair, and this wonderful opportunity to be able to share cuentos, stories with you. And we're here at Casa San Ysidro, this beautiful place where stories are usually told, people gather. And so I hope that you'll be able to have that same experience here with us as I share the cuento, Dancing with a Stranger. And I hope that you are able to share this story with someone else as well. So here's how the story goes. There was once this young girl. She had the most beautiful hair. In fact, she would spend hours and hours curling her hair. Well, she would go in her room and she would stay there, making herself beautiful. Well, her grandmother, her nana, she was busy cooking a la comida, making all the food, working so hard, making frijoles and tortillas, and all of this wonderful, wonderful food for her. Well, I have to say that she was a little bit spoiled rotten, and this young girl loved to go to fiestas. And she would tell her grandmother to do things for her all of the time. She wanted her to sew things for her, to cook things for her. And her grandmother was old. She was very old, and her fingers were wrinkled and old and tired with arthritis. But the young girl did not stop. She said this one year, "Nana, ven acá, come here." Well, the nana came out with her cane, and she went to the young girl, and she knew that something was up. Well, the young girl just looked around. She said, "Nana, I want you to make me a dress, the most beautiful dress with ruffles all around." Well, the nana was tired, very tired. She has just cooked so much comida, made tortillas, frijoles, chile, all kinds of food. But the young girl wanted her to sew a dress for the dance that year. Well, the grandmother agreed, and finally she took out her sewing machine. She began to sew and sew and sew until finally she was certain that the dress would be ready. It was a beautiful dress, after all. She had worked so hard on it. Well, she went and she took it to the young girl. She said, "Mijita, ven acá." But the granddaughter just looked at it and shook her head. She said, "No, add more ruffles. Add another layer here and another layer here." "Oh, Dios mío," the grandmother said, but she didn't complain. She went back to the sewing machine and she sewed all of the ruffles the young girl had asked her to sew. Until finally the dress was done. She handed it to the young girl. The young girl put it on, and she accepted the dress at this time. She curled her hair, and then she was ready for the dance. Well, the grandmother said, "Wait, mijita, before you leave, I would like to share a dicho with you. Do you know what dichos are? Yes, they're wise sayings or proverbs that teach us a valuable lesson. And long ago, in places like these, homes made out of adobe, people would gather around, and people, before they would leave and walk out the door, a grandmother or a parent would say, "Let me share this dicho with you, this saying with you, to teach you a lesson." Well, the grandmother said, "Mijita, you look beautiful in that dress, but it's not the dress or your hair that makes you beautiful. It's who you are inside that makes you beautiful, not the dress," she said. "Because there are dangers out there, and you have to remember what is important." Well, the young girl, she didn't want to hear it. She didn't want to hear cuentos or dichos or any of these things. She just wanted to go to the dance and stand out in front of everyone in the crowd. Well, she walked and walked, and it was breezy just like this. A beautiful day, and she knew that this was going to be a very special year. She walked into the dance hall, and the músicos were playing beautiful music. People were going around dancing and laughing. But she thought, nobody looks like they prepared as much as I did. No one has such a beautiful dress, or no one has hair as combed as well as mine is. And so she decided to stand there on the side, just looking at everyone. She thought, I am only going to dance with the most handsome stranger, and he is not here. So, as the other people were dancing, this young man who was brave came up to her. And he said, Señorita, would you please dance with me? She looked at him. She looked at his not-so-shined shoes and said, no. Go off and be on your way. While other people in the dance hall wanted to dance with him. But he was heartbroken. He couldn't even gather himself to go dance with him. Well, the young girl just stood there, looking around at everyone else having fun. Until finally, this other young man, who was also brave, he was the best singer in all of the whole community. And he stopped, cleared his throat, looked directly at the young girl, and sang. Would you dance with me? He sang. And it sounded as if the músicos were playing along with him. But the young girl looked at him with his not-so-combed hair and said, no. Go off, be on your way. And of course, other people wanted to dance with him, but he was heartbroken, and he went off just the same as the other young man. Well, finally, as the músicos were playing, this man stepped out from the corner. No one knew him in the community, and he walked toward her. His hand was reaching out toward her, and she reached out to him, and they didn't even have to say a thing. All he did was laugh. Ha, 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 he laughed. The most evil laugh I have heard, they say, that anyone had ever heard. But the young girl thought he was perfectly dressed, his hair was perfect, and he was, of course, the most handsome stranger she had ever seen. And so she asked him if he would spin her around so that everyone could see the ruffles on her dress and the curls in her hair. And he said, ha, 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 of course, I will spin you. Well, finally, the músicos began to play. There was beautiful music, and he began to spin her around and around. And at the beginning, it was wonderful. She knew that everyone was watching her as she was dancing, and they were gathered around her. So she began to make sure her hair and her curls were flowing in the breeze, just like the breeze we have now. But finally, he spun her faster. And then he spun her faster. And finally, she became dizzy. She looked down at her feet. And there, she saw breaking through his shoes, claws coming through his shoes. She thought that she was seeing things. She knew that that could not be claws. And finally, she looked to the back of his jacket. And there was a tail breaking through his jacket. Oh my goodness, she didn't know what to do. He spun her faster and faster as he laughed. Ha 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 ha. Ah ha ha ha. People began to scream, and suddenly a cloud of smoke came from his shoes and filled the whole dance hall, and people screamed and could not dance anymore. And until finally the music stopped. The smoke began to clear. And people looked around to see if they could find the young girl. And there she was, on the floor, lifeless. People tried to shake her, move her, but she was limp. They called the medicos, the doctors, and no one could wake her up. And so they say, from that day forward, they would tell her story. As everyone left, they were remembering the story of the young girl. And they looked for the handsome stranger, and he was nowhere. He had disappeared. And the nana went in to find her granddaughter and wished that she had listened to her dichos, to her cuentos, because those lessons may have saved her life. And so the grandmother went on, and they say years passed, and her story was shared in the hopes that people would listen to the moral of that story, dancing with a stranger.